Look, you're out of a base.
Let's see the water again, Steven.
Let's see how you guys comparing water.
There's no plants in this.
Yeah.
Awesome.
For now,
Since our topic is water, this is time.
Exactly. All right.
Guess what?
Welcome everyone to the Biohackers Water Cooler. I am co-host Fernando from Orlando, and with my friend Steven Klein, the Super Connector, the other co-host. And because of Steven Klein, Super Klein. There we go. That's your new name. You're the Super Klein.
We're upgrading daily.
Yeah, upgrading daily for sure. Super Klein, the Super Connector. I was very happy to meet Mirko and also Tim. So thanks for that introduction, Steven. Tell us a little bit about how you met this amazing gentleman here, and introduce them.
Sure. All right. So I met Mirko at the 2021 Biohacking Conference in Orlando, Florida. Had a pretty cool little jazzy party going up in their suite where they were demoing out the Bioharmonic Technologies Vibe Sound Healing Bed, and Mirko had his portable water restructuring devices that we will mention at some point in this podcast. And that was kind of cool. And then I kept in touch with him from there to a degree, but then we actually worked together at a biohacking conference at the 2022 biohacking conference in California this year, and then another event in San Diego, and on and on. Our special guest, because I didn't know found out he's going to be here today, which makes him an even more special guest because he wasn't originally slated to be here, is Tim Ruppel, who I have known a little longer than Mirko, but all of our, we've got these colliding worlds and we're all now friends. And Tim is one of the hardest working guys that I know, also a genius, and travels quite often. So I was not surprised to hear that Tim, who resides in North Carolina, New York, and all over, happened to be in San Diego today and joining our podcast. So good surprise. Thanks for joining us, Tim. And Tim has got a really cool role as the head of global expansion, product integration, and all kind of roles, you name it, for a really cool company called OsteoStrong. So there you have it.
Awesome. Thanks, Steven. I'll turn this to Mirko. Mirko, I've known you for a few weeks now, and we hit the ground running. And when it comes to creating, I've experienced working with you. You took me through one of your sessions, taught me a lot. I learned a lot from you. And in turn, I shared some of the things that I work with, and we started creating things together. So thanks, Steven, for that. What do you think is the opportunity for people to bring into their lives when it comes to health? Because you shared with me three things. You shared with me breath, hydration, and I believe mindset, something to do with an internal dialogue. Right. Mm-hmm. What is, in your opinion, something that is the opportunity for entrepreneurs to bring into their lives when it comes to how you've been living your life, which to me is super healthy, super agile, energized, and you have lots of tools. Right. To what's the opportunity for business owners to that you see that they can buy more or transform so they can have some of the things that you have created in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. I think the opportunity is, because most of the business owners are very busy, so they don't have, I'm looking at myself, I would have to make time to read through something, get into it. So, and sometimes I feel a little overwhelmed because there's so much information out there. So the opportunity that I want to is to make it simple and easy and go back to the basics. So, and this counts on a knowledge, on a protocol experience basis, and on a financial basis as well. So you just mentioned breath, water, and mindset. So breath is literally $150 hack, and you're done with breath for the rest of your life, right? So you get one or two good books. They're like $20 a pop. James Nestor, Breath, for example, really good introduction. You could go to Intake Breathing. It's a little company that make these nose clips. Very efficient, better than these strips you buy on CVS. So that's another $50. And then after that, you're pretty much good to go, right? So now you're nose breathing, and then you can maybe look into a few breath works, like the Wim Hof is a good example. That's what there's a bunch of other ones out there. So, and then you're done with that. So, and then the second one, which we're gonna focus on a little bit more today, is hydration. Which it's a slightly more complicated than breath, I would say, because we have two parts. The first part a lot of people know about, which is the chemical cleaning of water, the filtration. So that's part one. And then the part two is the restructuring, the structuring, the revitalizing, or the making it back to energy, the charging of water, right? So it has something to do with vibration and energy value and charge, like a battery, right? So if your battery's not charged, you're not going to get any energy on it. So the same counts for water. So that's
How does that happen?
Well, so water
I can understand.
Hey guys, before we go to the energy of water, that kind of thing, recap your third piece, because that part of the hydration will be the focus of this, and I want to steer that. But if we kind of veer off real quick now and then try to come back, it's going to
be so the third piece is the mindset. There again, two great options. First one, in my opinion, very sustainable, is meditation in general. So it's personally, I gotta say, for me, it's slightly more challenging. It has been slightly more challenging. Specifically, I did a few retreats where I just went to a meditation center, then no speaking for 9 days and just meditating 12 hours. It's a good imprint to get it started and rolling. And the other option is to do plant medicine-based treatments that can create a lot of neuroplasticity. Even if you don't have any high-grade PTSD, but it just gives your brain the option to think around problems in a different way, which can create a very, very positive mindset. So now those three, I think, are the basics for your health, then very closely followed by movement and flexibility, and of course, nutrition, meaning good foods and essential supplementation, depending on where you are. High-class sports person, you most likely will need more supplements than somebody that works out, let's say, a couple of hours a week. So
I love that.
So that's about it.
All right, so let's dig in a little bit into the water part.
Yes.
So you talked about filtration, and then restructuring or charging.
Energizing. Yes.
Energizing. So walk us through that.
So let's stick with the first part first, that most people know about, is the filtration. So filtration, we have a few options. So most basic is carbon filtration system. Let's start at the very basics. Some people have a Brita filter, which you just pour the water through. It's like a $20 item. The filter cartridges run around $8 to $9. You do want to replace them once per month for sure, because it's a loose carbon granule. So that's the big difference between a baked block filter of carbon that comes in a cartridge and between those loose carbon granules in that Brita. So they're a little tricky, because if you miss to exchange them, they will actually bleed through. That's what the term is. They will bleed through and then give off the toxins that they just filtered out for you. So you do really want to exchange them. That's why it has this little LED mark. It gives you like 4 bars, and then boop, 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 goes back, and then you don't just want to hit the button, actually exchange the cartridge. So, and it takes out 99% of the chlorine, it doesn't get any of the fluorides, minimum. So, but it really is good for the taste. So the next version up is a baked carbon, like mono block filter, as they call them. So lots of good companies out there in the United States, all over the world. There's a very old one in Germany. It's called Carbonite. So they make very sophisticated ones, and also needs to be exchanged every 6 to 10 months. But the advantage is they don't bleed through anymore. They just get that your water flow gets less and less until you have to finally exchange. Right. So now, then the next two options we have to go a little more into the full filtration is a reverse osmosis. A lot of people know that, and a distilling machine, distiller. So both pretty similar. They both demineralize the water. So they take everything out. And the distillation is pretty much creating a rain situation, right? So it's a condensation result. And the reverse osmosis has a very fine, a femtometer, not nano, not pico, femto, a femtometer, which is like a millionth of a of a micrometer, and that's how fine it filtrates the water, so it takes everything out, right? It leaves the water with a slightly acidic pH around 6.2, 6.4. So, and the distillation remains about the same. So, and they both create the same result. There's nothing in the water. So you get to all the fluorides, you get to all the chlorine, to all the heavy metals, everything. So that's pretty much our filtration, right? These are all very affordable. Carbon block filters, the cheapest. And then the reverse osmosis and the distillation is about the same for the device. And then the running cost of the distillation is, I want to say, maybe a quarter of what the reverse osmosis costs, because you really only need to delime it every 2 months and exchange that $10 carbon pad. So maybe it runs you $50-$60 a year. And the reverse osmosis put more around $100 to $200 per year, because you have to exchange the pre-filters and then at some point the membrane every 3 to 5 years.
Mirko, if you can give us an example of one of those, we'll throw a link in the show notes so people can see what that distiller thing looks like and what a reverse osmosis, maybe a popular one or something they can take a look at as well. In addition, what your stuff does.
Yes.
Also.
This is very good. I forget the name of it. This is very good. I have one of those very good American company that makes very sophisticated distillers. So the small version that makes a little gallon jug is around $700. So I'll throw that in later. I think they're from Georgia or something, and very, very good machines. So I highly recommend those. So they work really well. It's a little bit of a process, but it's totally worth it.
All right. Then the other topic, Mirko, moving from filtration, before we get into the energizing and structuring water, you'll hear a lot of out there now of talking about alkaline water, Kingans, things like that, other machines. So let's talk about that. And then let's talk about structured water.
Yes.
And that kind of thing. So we kind of cover all the bases. And if I'm missing something, you can fill in the gaps. You know more about this stuff, even hydrogen water as well, with the tablets versus the machines.
Yes, I think it's a good point. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. It has been quite a ride for the last, I want to say it started about 15, 20 years ago when I got into it, that there were these alkalizers. And so first difference I want to bring to attention is there's a difference between alkaline and alkalized water. So alkaline water can be very natural, or you can recreate it by just adding minerals that are bases, right? So now you're going into a pH that is, let's say, around 8 or 8.5, depending on how many minerals you put in there. And then some rivers, some natural spring sources are slightly alkaline. They're not going to reach 9 or 10, but they're like 8, 8.5. Others are slightly acidic. Most of them are around 7, neutral. But the marketing thing that came up about 15 years ago is these alkalizers. So, and what they do is they're using electricity. They quasi zap and then split up the H- and the H+ on an ionic basis. So now you have one water that is acidic with all the H+ in it, all the positively charged ions, and then you have water that is highly baseline with all the negatively charged hydrogen ions in it. So now the idea is that the positively charged ions with the H+, you can use that water for cleaning purposes. It's around 4 or 5 pH level, or you can just dump it. You know, if you have anything to clean right now, then just get rid of it. But it's the off result to make the H- water. So now the H- usually it's measured in millivolt, and they use an ORP, an oxygen reductive meter. So, and most water that's not alkalized is around plus 80 or plus 100. And then once you alkalize it, it's around minus 500, minus 600, minus 800, depending on how strong the alkalizer is. So I want to bring to attention that all these measurements like pH or what's the other one, ppm, they don't really indicate a quality of the water. They just show you some part of it, right? So ppm doesn't indicate what's in there, it just says that there is something in there. So same with the millivolt, just because the ORP meter is minus, and the guy from Kangen tells you this is great water because it's minus 600, that's what you want. It doesn't really it doesn't really have anything to do with biology per se. So, and the interesting part I want to bring to the first attention is when you alkalize water, so it's not stable, right? So it takes less than 6-7 hours, and it's gonna revert right back to plus and minus H combining. So there it is. I mean, you would have to redo that process every 5 to 6 hours in order to stay at your minus 600. That's what you want to do. So number one. Number two, I can't think of any natural application in the wild where water gets zapped by electricity. So that, I mean, sometimes a flash of lightning hits the water, and then that process may happen here and there. But again, 3-4 hours later, it reverts back into its natural state, which is plus and minus H combined.
So Mirko, can you talk a little bit about what their goal in alkalizing the water is in the blood alkaline through drinking, and also talk a little bit about, well, our natural state, our stomach is acidic. And if you were to go that route, what you would have to do to make that situation ideal and healthiest if you use that version.
Yeah. So the idea is of alkalized water or alkaline water in general to make the body alkaline. So if you have if you're very acidic, then this can help. And I actually talked to the water structuring guy from UMH, which we're going to get into later, and he says yes, there is a slight application for those things, and specifically when you're very ill or when you have a hangover or when you're like super acidic, you just come from, I don't know, like having slept days or something. And then he says, and be careful, you might want to only do 1 liter, so 32 ounces in the morning per day. You want to at least leave 3 hours before and 3 hours after when you ingest food. Just think about it, our stomach acid is 1.5 pH. So if I ingest a 10 pH water right before I eat or right after I have eaten, I'm going to really slow down that digestive process, which is not necessarily a good thing. I mean, if you have an iron stomach and you're just plowing through food, you might not be influenced, but I personally have a little more sensitive digestive system. So, and I've tried this before, like years ago with this alkaline stuff when it first got hyped. And it just did not make me feel good at all. So short term, I don't think it's a water that one wants to drink all day long, even though the promoted effects are to make the body alkaline, and it can happen. So there's scientific proof for this, and people do feel better when they drink alkaline water. Sometimes I think that just drinking more water makes these people feel better. It wouldn't really matter if it was alkaline or not alkaline. That's my personal impression that I get from these all these companies out there. And Kangen is just one of the, let's say, the Coca-Cola version of these things. They have a really good filtration system that comes with it, right? So it's a carbon block filter. It's just probably also the most expensive carbon block filter for $2,500. You could get that for $100. With the same, intensity of filtration. So, and the alkalizing property, when you take the minus 600 millivolt water and you run it through one of those energizers, it goes right back to plus 80, which shows you, because the structuring unit brings it back to its natural state. So it shows you that the natural state of the water is really plus 80. So, and again, one more time to sum it up. Yes, there's an application for alkaline water or alkalized water in a very responsible dosage in a very narrow window of time and application. So I personally do not believe in becoming constantly alkaline by drinking alkalized water, because the blood pH is rather influenced by breath work, which brings us back to the first one, and by nutrition, which brings us to the last part, which is especially herbs or herb adaptogens. They'll really influence your blood pH by bringing it through the digestive system. So if you're looking for a long run, not a quick fix of the alkalinity in your body, yes, first of all, take stress out. That'll make you acidic. So stress, I'd say, it's probably half of it. And then take out highly acidic foods, specifically things like sugar, alcohol, pork. Those metabolize rather in an acidic environment in the body.
So,
yeah, so now we have that. And again, if somebody wants to do that alkalization, fine, just be responsible about it and make sure that you leave it in a special window.
So I want to then ask you what is that you have found as a solution? But before you answer that question, if we can just have Tim share for a minute or two, what Mirko has said and what you know about water, what's from your background, what do you have to say?
So that's kind of wild because I come from a Kangen salesman perspective, and that blew my mind because years ago I was slinging water machines and I never looked at it from a standpoint of alkalizing something and changing its state and changing it back versus having something that's created in an alkaline state. So that like having the form be alkalized or having something outside alkalize it, have it revert back to its original form. So for me, that was really wild because, you know, I was taught what to say and how to say it. So I was doing that and I was really good at it because we became a ABC 123 64A, something like that. And we were a few sales away from getting residual, and I let the business go to an old business partner in an acquisition. And so it's really cool to see that and or to differentiate that now. I have dove into the biohacking space more and more over the last few years, and at the end of the day, something that he said is, you know, natural state, where it came from, its place. And that's what a lot of technology does. If you go on a PEMF mat, it's gonna give you a result when it's on the Earth's harmonic frequency. So when we're emulating nature and we're imprinting things that were originally a part of our environment, you know, the paleo aspect is natural things. Well, our environment has changed. So what is natural is now changing. You know, we no longer live in huts. We live in square boxes, square boxes that get in our square boxes to go to work and sit in our square boxes. So
Out of concrete.
are out of concrete, which is not a natural environment. So I think it's really wild to start to ask questions and say, what is the differentiator? What made this what we thought it was? And is that true? Because prior to a few minutes ago, I thought a Kangen was the best machine on the planet. And I have his water system. We haven't had this conversation. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, and it's simple little aha moments. And I think that what I'm taking away from today is it's implementation. It's changing now that I know better, I must do better. So knowing that there is an application for a Kangen machine, that's really cool. And making sure that it's properly used, because I know that a lot of people will get one story and they'll abuse it or overuse it, not by recklessness, but by ignorance, because we don't know. And once we learn something new, we're so excited about it. So I'm excited to dive down this rabbit trail of Mirko more, because I know I have a lot to learn. And with that, on a water standpoint, my background is pretty extensive. I've spent time with Robert Slovak. His family is the inventor and founder of the reverse osmosis system. I've spent time with a couple other people who created the light water, which eliminates the heaviest molecule which is deuterium. And when deuterium is removed, it's like taking the pinball out of the pinball machine in our body, and it allows the mitochondria to have a healthier environment to thrive. And so with the deuterium in it from the traditional water source, you're getting DNA on a daily basis. So when you switch into a light water status for a period of time, you're increasing your body's ability to heal from within. And so like when you look at it, water is a foundational. I mean, what is it? 68% of our body's water?
70 to 80, yeah.
70 to 80, depending on your hydration, your age.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty cool to think that I knew a lot and be sitting here learning the entire time in a baffled mode, kind of like, I have a lot to learn. So, you know, thank you guys for the invite, and thank you, Mirko, for the wealth of knowledge there.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing it. That's really good input, especially coming from this Kangen standpoint of view. I love that. And it's like, I'm not talking anything down. It's just, as long as we know the framework for things, that's when we can use them in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And Tim, thanks for bringing up the light water deal, because that's so next level that there's such a small percentage of people that are even aware of what the word deuterium is, or deuterium depleted water. We are going to have a separate podcast about that, but that stuff's so far out of reach of the average consumer that we're not even going to play with that in this realm. But thanks for bringing it up, and then we'll talk about it and, you know, what it's going to look like for that to come to the average or to the masses at some point. But yeah, that's a really cool add in. Thank you.
Yeah. And so Mirko, back to you. What is the solution that you have come up with from what you know?
Yeah. So to make it simple, the solution for having the most energy rich water when not living next to a spring source in the Rocky Mountains because we could all just move to the Rocky Mountains or to the Alps and then just have like a wood pitcher and draw it right from the source, no EMF, nothing involved, and then drink it right there. That's one solution. I think we can all live there. So, and, you know, maybe we don't want to live there. Maybe we do want to live in a concrete box in San Diego, you know, nothing. But let's use technology to bring that spring source from the Alps back to our kitchen. Right? So that's the solution. I'm a very pragmatic guy when it comes to these things. How can I implement something, if possible, in a highly convenient way that I just have to open my my faucet and then it comes spring water out of it right away.
Awesome. So what is this water system that you came up with?
So the water system that I've been using for 20 years myself and that I'm now distributing in the United States, the company is called UMH. They're an Austrian company. They've been around for 45 years. The technology itself is over 100 years old. The grandfather of this technology is called Victor Schauberger. And Victor Schauberger lived in like the 80s. I think he was born 1885 or something. And he is basically the Nikola Tesla of water technology. He created the first flow pattern and the first patents in the early 20th century, like 1905, 1910, which are today still used, which is interesting, in like high industry, cement mixing, concrete building, industrial bakery. And they're very simple. So they have like an arranged flow system that you just, it's like there are these, what is it, like 20-inch diameter hoses that they make the deep water for making the concrete. So, and they just run through one paddle on the very end. And just that one little flow pattern curve that it takes, that already makes the concrete bind about 40% better without doing that. They don't do anything else. So it's been used for the last 100 years in these industries. Now he started all these things. He built these parabolic funnels and all that. And there's a whole deep dive from Victor Schauberger. And then his great grandson, Jörg Schauberger. So they live about 100 miles apart from this family called Rathheiser, which is the family that owns UMH. So, and the great grandson of Victor Schauberger, Jörg Schauberger, helped Bernhard and Josef Rathheiser, who own UMH, to finalize what Victor Schauberger started about 100 years ago. So UMH is the only and most pure downline of this water Tesla.
So to complement what you just said, I was recently in Colombia and we went to the side of the mountains, and as I was leaving, I looked down at the sidewalk. And when I looked down at the sidewalk, I realized that the concrete that was poured on the side of a mountain without technology that we have in the United States was flawless and had no cracks. And so in a very rough translation, I said, why is your concrete so strong? And somebody went back and forth. There was like 4 people translating. Finally, the guy laughs and he just points over at the waterfall and he goes, our water source. And hearing you say that the flow and the natural aspect of the water allows concrete to be 40% stronger in its curing process, curing process makes a lot of sense, especially when a reflection was literally last week. I was in Colombia on the side of a mountain, a couple hours outside of a city, and their response to me saying, wow, the concrete is flawless. Meanwhile, in the United States, if you talk to a concrete company, you'll say something like, hey, will it crack? How's it going to look? They won't say it's not will it crack, it's when will it crack, because they guarantee that concrete in the United States will crack. So that gives a lot of questions to the water source and the frequencies and the way that it's structured, because if you can structure water in a better manner, a more natural state, and create concrete, you're creating a stronger foundation for the world we live in.
That's a very good point. Yes, I agree. Very good.
So what's the then result for the bodies of the people drinking this type of water? What happens to the body of the person?
So in a nutshell, when you drink spring water, any spring water on the planet, depending, some sources are even higher vibration, some are low, but they all share this in common. The water is charged in a certain way and it carries a certain resonance. So resonant frequency, that's the key word, right? So, and this resonant frequency allows our cells to fully uptake the hydrogen that's in the water. right? So we can get clean bottled water that actually comes from a Yosemite spring source, but how has it been delivered to our homes? First of all, they need an electric pump to funnel it. Then it goes through a whole pipe system. Then they put it in bottles, then they put it on a truck, then they drive it to LA, they drive it to San Diego. So the water picks up on all that frequency along the way. 2 weeks later, then you maybe put it in your fridge. That's another EMF source that you put it on, and then you drink it. So now it has collected on a frequency basis, frequency pollutants, let's call it that. So, and now you drink that stream of information, which is unaligned information, you put that in your body. Again, the chemistry of the water is great. Most bottled waters are fine. They don't have any fluoride in it, but it's not cutting it. It doesn't mean that you're really accessing the hydrogen in the water because it's not talking to the cells. So our cells have these protein channels. They're called aquaporin channels. And they resonate with a certain frequency, which in this case is 22.5 hertz. Simple. So all spring water on the planet and the water that comes from this UMH device that we're talking about resonate exactly with 22.5 hertz. So now imagine the H2O coming, talking to the channel in the cell, and it's actually uptaking the hydrogen intracellular to get a deep mitochondrial hydration. And hydrogen is nothing else but energy. I mean, there's hydrogen cars, that's like a new technology that we're thinking about maybe doing. And so if you look at a hydrated and dehydrated person, what's the big difference? The dehydrated person sits there, they're usually a little bit, they don't want to really do stuff. And then the hydrated person is usually very ambient. And they want to do stuff because they have a lot of energy. Their metabolism as well, they go to the bathroom quite a bit, so they're flowing. They're like a river, like a lake that's in good shape. So they're peeing, they're pooping, everything is flowing, everything is just oil, it's the oil machine. So and hydration is the basis, plus breath again, but it's the second most important basis of all the functions in our bodies. Your kidney, your liver, your heart. If you're hydrated, and let's say you have a little accident, you'll have a shorter recovery time when you're hydrated versus you're not hydrated. Without even any treatment, just by healing yourself. Right? So back to our kitchen. So this company, UMH, over the last 40 years has developed a few different applications for these devices. And they're all highly functional and elegant at the same time. All these devices are 24 gold plated inside and outside, or rhodium plated, so which ensures a very long life of these devices. The bare minimum is, I want to say, 10 to 15 years. I know some customers in Germany, they have these house built-in devices for almost 30 years already built in to the same house. I even switched houses 3 times in the last 7 years. I just called a plumber for a couple $100. They sorted the device out and they sorted into the next house. I use the exact same device.
And Mirko, you want to explain how that application is, how it just pretty much goes around the water line, just so we have a visual of what you're talking about.
So imagine your main water line is usually around 3/4 to 1 inch. If you have a bigger house, maybe 1.5 inches. So and all the plumber does is he comes to the house, he arrives, he cuts a piece out of the, maybe like, let's say, in a foot. He cuts it out. The device itself is only about 4.5 inches long, and then it gets screwed into the pipe, and now it's becoming part of your pipeline system. Right. So now the water that runs through with, let's say, 80 psi is now going through the structuring device, coming out on the other end differently. Now, what is happening on the inside of that structure? So I think that's an important question. Right. And again, in a nutshell, to break it down simple, it's a frequency device. It reprograms the water. It does 2 things at the same time. It does a complete format C. So it erases all the frequency pollutants the water has collected up to this point, which brings us back to, okay, well, it's set in a fridge. It was used with an electric pump to funnel it. Now all this frequency pollutants become erased, done. So it's a slate. And now it gets reinformed, reintroduced to a resonant high vibration. How does the device do that? There's 7 principles of water structuring. The most common one is what people refer to as vortexing. right? So when water vortexes around left and right spinning, it builds that double helix, which also looks like a DNA strain. So it might be a coincidence or might have something to do with it. So, and so that's a very common one. And there's a few devices that just focus on the vortexing. Then the other one, which is also very commonly known, is gemstone selections. You know, some people, I remember friends in Santa Fe, they would just add certain gemstones into their water pitcher and then would let it sit there for a while. And then the vibration of these gemstones would transfer over into the water and slowly add that frequency to it. They're not really erasing anything, but they have the ability to overwrite information, right? So that's a good part. So then the third part, and this is now gets interesting. Let's say the third part is high grade materials, so gold plating, rhodium plating. The next part is direct contact. So the water actually flows through the device. It's not a magnet you just clamp around the pipeline, or it doesn't use any electricity, right? There's nothing that it's just in the realm of the water. It actually touches things. It's part of its flow. So that's important. So now the next part is phi ratio geometry in constructing the devices. So now phi ratio means golden mean. A lot of people heard this about art. It's called the golden cut. Certain ratios. A whole body is built in a golden mean phi ratio. This and this equivalent to this and this. Right? So it's a ratio thing. So like everything in our face, that's why we look so appealing to each other, because we are grown or made in this phi ratio geometry. If you look at a broccoli, if you look at a tomato, at anything, you can always see the phi ratio. Bees grow in this Fibonacci sequencing, right? So this is all phi ratio interpretation of reality. So now, if I construct a device, let's say a natural action water, it's first of all, it's a plastic housing, so they don't really care too much about the high grade materials, but also it's just 10 centimeters or 12 centimeters long. It's a certain circumference. There's no phi ratio in constructing that device, that housing. So what UMH does is it's either a sphere or a cylinder, and the inside of the device is built in those phi ratios. So that alone, the water picks up on all these angles and that geometry. It's a big part. So then another part is pyramid energies. So people might have heard this from the Egyptian pyramids. They have been constructed at a certain angle, right? So 52.1 degrees on the bottom of the pyramid. So that alone, if you make a pyramid with that angle, let's say out of wood, on plastic, put some copper around it, enhances it, and in the lower third of that pyramid, you cut an apple in half, and you put one apple right on that pyramid, a little elevated. Again, can be pretty much out of any material. And then you put the other half somewhere else, and then you go 6 hours later, you go back. Then your apple outside the pyramid turned brown because it's oxidizing. The one under the pyramid barely turned brown. So it has some sort of preserving mechanism just by the geometry of that pyramid. So pyramid energies, that's what it's referred to. And then the last part, and this is the unique selling point of UMH versus all the other ones that I've checked out so far, and again, they've been doing this for almost half a century, is that they developed a biofeedback / bioradiation device in order to charge water and to imprint it with a certain resonant frequency. So now all these devices that UMH makes have these tiny little glass vials in it. They're about, I want to say, ½ inch long. So, and they carry a water on the inside. That water is a certain mineral solution that contains a proprietary mixture out of monoatomic particles and certain minerals. And that's pretty much the hard drive quality. And then they charge these vials with an analog, not a digital, biofrequency device, like an Oberon, which the Russian developed in the 50s, that they charged all their cosmonauts with before they sent them into space. That's why they're so superhuman, because they literally charge all the cells from these cosmonauts. They call cosmonauts, we call them astronauts. So now what they do is, let's say the small devices have 7 of those vials in, right? And one of those quartz crystal pyramids on the top. So when the water goes through, either the little ball, it's a portable device, or we have the inliner for under the sink, it gets split up and it does the double helix vortexing. It picks up on the gold plating, it picks up on the pyramid energies, and then it runs through and over these glass vials. Now imagine each one of those glass vials has a certain resonant frequency, like an orchestra. You have the violins, that's the first vial. Then you have the trumpets, that's your second vial. Then you have your cellos, that's your third vial. So they all are harmonious within themselves, but they also resonate together as a whole, like this whole orchestra. So depending on the size of the device, you have from 6 up to 72 of those vials. 72, the biggest device, that's for like a whole casino or for a whole hotel with 1,000 rooms. So 3-inch opening is about this size, makes about 120 gallons per minute flow rate. So that's a very big device, right? But the one for the house unit has 10, the one for the small farm unit has 12, for example, of those resonant vials in there. And now, after this water has been made to a clean slate, all the pollutants, all the frequency pollutants have been erased. Now it's being imprinted with this natural resonating, back to what Tim said before, we're emulating nature here, right? So we're pretty much reprogramming or re-imprinting the natural frequencies. And when it comes out on the other side, now it is in a perfect structure. And that's why they call it structured water, because water has about 2,000, 2,500 possibilities to connect on a geometrical pattern on a molecular basis. So depending on what the angle is between the H molecule and the oxygen molecule, right? We have 2 of the oxygen molecules, 1 hydrogen molecule. So now, once they have a certain angle, and this is interesting, if you have the oxygen molecule here and you have your hydrogen coming off here, and you would draw a middle line, then each side of it would be 52.1 degrees, exactly like the pyramid in Egypt. So 104.2 degrees is the full angle between the 2 hydrogen bonds connecting, the 2 oxygen bonds connecting to the hydrogen. So now when that happens, and you look at each of those triangles, right, then they automatically connect into a hexagon. That's why sometimes people refer to hexagonal water. And it's a little bit of tricky term, because don't imagine a static hexagon. It's a 3D underlying pattern. It's the information idea of the hexagon. And within milliseconds, atoms go in and out, but they reform in a live feature into this hexagonal shape. So why hexagon? Well, one could say that just by the geometry, and I mean, we learned this in 9th grade geometry, math, right? So that's a very, very stable pattern, just from an architect type of view. So you got to ask yourself, why does a beehive choose the hexagon to create the only substance that defies time? It's honey. Well, honey is 90% water. So they're really making a glucose water that lasts forever, highly structured. So the bees naturally chose to build the hive in the same way as the structure, the molecular structure of the water that they're creating that lasts forever. Again, could be a coincidence.
I think we're onto some coincidences.
Yeah. Or they could just be dialed in with the natural flow of things, and they just, in a hermetic sense, as above, so below, they're just recreating in their own housing what they are creating in their food. So that could be an explanation. So, and now once the water has the structure, now to the final step, once the water has the structure, it resonates in 22.5 hertz, which now talks the exact same language as these aquaporin protein channels in our cells. The H2O comes to the cell, it communicates, protein channel opens, hydrogen goes into the cell, feeds the mitochondria. Right? And now we can get highly scientific about this. Every millisecond, it's 15 of those H atoms being turned in a little nano engine, which is the exact mitochondria. Later on, that's interesting for the deuterium explanation, by the way, in the next one. So, and this is how we derive now energy. So we're literally having these nano engines that spin with 6,000 RPM each millisecond, 15 atoms of hydrogen in that nano engine. So, and that's how you now get this energy. So what's the result of people drinking this water? I'm a practical guy. I love science, and also if science sounds great, I don't feel any different, I'm not gonna buy it. It's that simple, right? It's not gonna work for me. Maybe it works for somebody else. So, well, I want to say 99.9% of these customers that buy this, myself included, 20 years ago when I started, is they just feel that they have like an extra battery in their body now. And it makes sense because water has now a charged potential. It has a differential. So it's charged on this, very polar. Now this polarity now transfers over to your cells. And this is exactly how a battery works in your car. It's a charged potential. So there has to be a differential between, because otherwise it's flat. When it's flat, it's low charge. Right? So now you're constantly putting in this high charged water, and that gives you the ability to think differently, to feel differently, to do different things, to sleep deeper. For example, for me, my day low that I used to have, and this is like me being 20 years old. So I had like between 1 and 2 p.m. Usually had a little, depending on my sleep, obviously, but usually had like a little dip down. So, and that basically disappeared after drinking that water for a few weeks. So, and also I'm going to the bathroom about twice as much, which is, I don't want to say annoying, but it's just something that you need to consider. When I go on a road trip, I'm like that girl that every hour has to take a big or every 90 minutes. But that's okay. I'll do that. I'm happy with that.
So, Mirko, that's really good information. I should have prefaced at the beginning of this podcast that when I come on and talk about water, most people out there, and I don't know what percentage it would be, but it'd be a vast majority, thinking, okay, what type of filters are out there? What's the best filter? What we're talking about in structuring water, in bringing things back to nature, the resonance and all of that, has a quantum quality that most people aren't familiar with what we're talking about here. But in our bodies, one of the different words, you can call it structured water, you can call it fourth phase water, because we think of 3 phases of water, liquid, solid, and gas, or EZ water, which stands for exclusion zone. And the reason why we have that is the healthy cells in your body form an exclusion zone where you have the structured water pushes the toxins out through the barrier into the rest of the body. So we have healthy, so the healthy cells already have structured water in healthy living beings. And so this is really healthy water when you have it structured. So for resources, you can go look up a book called The Fourth Phase of Water by Gerald Pollack, who's the preeminent leader in this field now at the University of Washington. And it's a thick book. And there are probably some other resources. And if you have any, Mirko, we can put in the notes about the 7 principles of this. That would be great as well, because this isn't common knowledge. You don't go look to study filtration and learn about what we're having a conversation about right here. But this is the next level of getting the best water in your body. So,
and I think Gerald Pollack, by the way, works with UMH. He knows Bernhard Rattheiser personally for many years. So, and I think this easy or exclusion zone water, this is actually a good point where you can understand that chemistry and frequency are overlapping intensively. So exclusion zone, what does it mean? It means that you have pretty much a cellular filter. So let's say even you don't filter the water, you just structure it, which I do not recommend in the United States. You do want to get all the toxins out of there. But let's say you have to make a decision, either structuring or filtration. Well, then I would choose the filtration. Choose the structuring. Because the amount of toxins in the water is not killing you right away. It's killing you slowly. So you're not going to get impacted too much right away. It's over time. But now, because of this exclusion zone that I have around my cells, only the molecules with 1, 2, and 3, which means hydrogen, helium, and lithium. Those are the only 3 that are allowed to pass. Anything that's bigger, which is everything else, is not going to be able to transport its toxin frequency to the cell any longer. So let's say I still have chlorine in the water, I still have fluoride in the water, but now imagine it's encapsulated in the structural water, and also it can't transfer to the cell. So you're literally just dissipating it, you're peeing it out. And they did this test, UMH did this test with 400 students that drank a glass of tap water, unstructured, with 50 milligrams of nitrates in it. So that's a good amount to trace it. And then the other students drank the tap water structured with 50 milligrams of nitrates in it. Next morning, everybody peed in a glass. It's called a urine osmolarity test. And the first group uptook pretty much 50 milligrams of nitrates, and the second group peed out 50 milligrams of nitrates. So there's your tracer. And yes, that does have a chemical limit. If you put 10 grams of arsenic acid in there and then only structured, I would be doubtful that that works and doesn't hit your cells. So there's a chemical limit to these things. And again, the 1.5 milligrams of fluoride, that's fluoride per cubic meter of water in the United States, and the 4.5 milligrams per cubic meter of chlorine is able to be handled by that structuring device. So, and you can feel it. So my house doesn't have a filtration system, but once I installed the whole house unit, the smell of the chlorine went down by about 90%, just the smell, without a filtration system, right? So that indicates, and we have good sensors on nose or taste, you know. So if we're dialed in and tuned in, we can trust those sensors. We don't need a device that some guy invented all the time, you know.
When I was in San Diego back in October, I had acquired a UMH device, and we took water that you could smell the chlorine on. We took water that you couldn't, and I'm very skeptical. So I poured it through the device and I drank it, and I sniffed the other one and sniffed it, sniffed the other one, and asked everybody at the table to sniff it. Everybody's like, wow, who put chlorine in it? And I had to explain to everybody, that's what you uptake on a daily basis, are the chemicalized fashion of water that's stuffed in pipes and taken out of its natural structure. And I'm at the beginning of a rabbit hole I didn't know I was going to explore and get excited about, but holy crap, today has really opened up my mind on the fact that I have something that I use occasionally that is now going to be very a part of my daily routine, and most likely in my luggage with a note on it for a TSA saying this little thing is a water device, because it's oddly looking. And
it looks like a round thing, you know, that could maybe
structure water. And so thank you guys for putting this together, because I think it's been very enlightening, and this is a field that I've done a lot of business in, and I've sold reverse osmosis, I've sold Kangen machines, I've learned about what I knew, and what I realized today is I learned what I was told, and I did very little questioning of it. And over the last few years, I've learned how to question what I'm being told and verify, because at the end of the day, we don't do that as a society as much as we should.
Yep. And Tim, good point around that is, we're still snowed on some things. There's a guy named Edward Bernays. He's dead now, but he's the father of propaganda, and nobody knows who his name is because whoever they are don't want us to know. But Alcoa came to him, in the early 1900s, and were like, "Hey, we got a lot of toxic fluoride runoff of this aluminum plants. What are we gonna do about this?" He's like, "No problem." And he had a bunch of dentists say that fluoride's good for you, and got it into the entire country's water supply, and it's still there, even though we know it's bad for you. Oh, the government wouldn't do that to us. Yeah, they would.
I was at a conference recently, and a doctor showed a arsenic and then fluoride chart for the levels of toxicity to the body. And there's different types of fluoride. Like, as we're learning today, there's different types of water. So water is H2O. And what I didn't know is there's 2,500, correct?
Yeah.
Different ways for H2O to form. And if we look at a key is going to have, let's say, 2,500 different ways. And if your key doesn't work on your car, you're not getting in. So when you look at water, it's not getting in your body. The way that I used to sell a Kangen machine was, on a hot summer day, if you take a bottle of water and you drink it, your stomach is sloshing. However, you're still thirsty. It's because the structure of the water is not going through the keyhole in the membrane for your body to absorb it. And when you drink the water through the devices that Mirko offers and other similar things on the planet, you aren't as thirsty, and it feels like a smoother glass of water, which sounds funny, because at the end of the day, now that I hear the 2,500 factors and it's finding one that's a match for where it's going, it's being absorbed. And I was like, yeah, sure, we'll talk about water. Now I'm sitting here mind blown. So,
well, you just reminded me that structured water actually has a chemical property of H2O3. If you look at it, it's no longer H2O. It still acts and behaves like water, but it's just different.
And also, let's put this to go back to the alkaline feature. So when you structure the water with a sophisticated technology like UMH, you're decreasing the surface tension by 10%. Now, that may not sound a lot. It is huge. 2% would be huge because water has 64 anomalies that we are aware of. The most common one is that it has its highest density at 4 Celsius plus, which is 48 Fahrenheit, right? So that's why ice expands. There's no other material in the universe that expands when it gets colder. It shrinks, not water. So, and another anomaly of water is it has the highest solubility of all liquids, has the highest cooking point, and so on and so on. And it has the highest surface tension of all liquids. That's why these little water striders can walk on the water, because they're using the surface tension. And if you take a needle, like a sewing needle, and you have a bowl of water and you very carefully place it and let it go, it'll swim, even though it's a metal needle. You can use a little coffee filter or a tea filter, put it on that and let the tea filter slowly sink to the bottom. That'll for sure work, that experiment. Well, if you structure the water 10 times, it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the other thing. So the surface tension goes down 10%, ergo, it makes it more permeable. Hence, it has the same features and qualities as an alkaline water, but without changing the pH. The pH stays the same before and after. 7.5 going in, 7.5 going out. But now the surface tension is 10% less, so it's more permeable. Just a feature that an alkaline water would bring to you without being alkaline, without influencing your stomach, right? So that's another feature. And what I would like to share in the very end is, sometimes people ask me, so what is your optimum solution that you do at your daily basis at your house, right? So what's your filtration system? How do you do it? And again, I'm living in a city, so in my mind, I have two ideas. I want to have a water that is super rich in energy. So I'm putting 105 octane fuel in my race car. Number one. Number two, I want a water that is as low as possible in ppm. So why? Because I want it to detoxify me on a regular and constant basis. So if I filter with a standard carbon filter, I'm taking all the 98-95% of all the BS out of the water, but it's still 400 or 500 ppm. So the water is still fairly saturated, so its ability to uptake new things is a little less. It's not like tap water with 1,000 ppm, but it's just a little less. So now what I do is I have the house unit for my whole house because I like to shower and bathe in it. Again, I don't even need a filtration for that. And then I have a carbon filtration under my sink. Very easy, $600 setup. Couple $100 a year to change the filters. So now it gets structured and filtered. And then I take it and then I put that in a distiller. I choose a distiller over reverse osmosis because it's lower maintenance and I have it sitting in the garage, so I don't mind. And I don't have an extra faucet coming out of my kitchen sink. It's a small kitchen. So now once I distilled it, then it has pretty much 0 to 2 ppm. So now what I do is I remineralize it a tiny bit. And to understand what this is, we're not uptaking minerals through water to begin with, period. We uptake minerals through food, herbs. If you want to reach your calcium amount per day, eat a piece of cheese. There's your 800 milligrams of calcium. If you would try to do your magnesium and calcium per day, you would have to drink, even from a great mineral water, you have to drink 20, 30 gallons per day. So that's not possible anyway. Because there's like, the amounts in it is like 15 milligrams per liter, right? Or like 30 milligrams per gallon. Well, your daily amount of calcium is 800 milligrams. So just by that math, you're not supposed to uptake minerals through water to begin with. But we need a little bit of mineral salt in the water so that the structuring device can work. Why does it need mineral salt in the water? Because imagine a crystallization process. So like a mineral grows, a crystal starts as a mineral. And then through time and pressure, it crystallizes out around that mineral and becomes this super awesome quartz crystal. The same happens on a molecular basis when it goes through this device. So I choose a Celtic salt solution. So I solve Celtic salt. You can get those big pieces or just take the powder. And then when you saturate the water, it's around 26% salt solution. Then I have a tiny little dropper. And I only add about 5 drops per gallon of my distilled water. So which brings it back to 30 ppm, super low. By the way, most natural spring sources are around 50 ppm. They're not high in minerals. They're just balanced in minerals and aligned. They're not high in minerals. And so again, that's a food thing, minerals. So, and then once I put that salt solution back in there, then I run it through my Delta standalone device. I like the ceremonial process because then I can pray on the water when I'm running through. Love and gratitude goes through my mind while I'm pouring it through. I'm looking how pretty it looks. Got this gold device shining at me. So it's just fun for me. Right? And it's a minute. I really don't mind. And I have the distiller on this table and the other structuring on that table. So it's the same process. So now, but I remineralize it a little bit before. Now I run it through. So now what have I created with this? I have created pretty much a rainwater equivalent that has no toxins in it. Because rainwater nowadays is questionable because of all the air pollution. It rains down, picks up on stuff chemically. So I have a high energy rich water. It's been structured once to the house unit and then again through a tiny one I have under the sink and then through my standalone one. And the standalone one I have to do in the end because I remineralize it and then I structure it again. Because when you do an RO system, it does take the structure apart. The distiller takes about 20% of the structure out. That's why also I prefer distillation over a reverse osmosis, because even if you wouldn't restructure after the distilling, you'd still remain with about 80% of that beneficial structure. But I go the extra mile because I'm sitting at the source, why not? And now I have a 50 ppm, highly detoxifying water, super energy rich. So, and I think for me personally, that is the water I align most with. It tastes great. It gives me a lot of energy. I use all this water for my other potions that I make, my mouthwash, anything else that's water-based that I do like medicine work with has exactly that water. So that's a little tip.
Right on. It's too bad that you weren't cast in the movie The Water Boy and Adam Sandler got the job.
Yeah, I think that would have been my job. Yeah, you're right. Running with the structuring portable device and
My mom always said.
Well,
All right, guys. Well, that was water school, man. That was exciting. Great, man. That was the most interesting topic discussion on water I've ever had, other than previous discussions I've had with you about the same topic. But that was the most comprehensive, encompassing about water. So thank you very much.
Thanks for asking and happy to share. Thanks for your input, Tim, and thanks for you, Fernando, hosting this whole thing with Steven. So yeah, I think hopefully this will help people to understand a little more about it. And now they have good points to go a little deep dive. We'll share a few links when we're done here. They can just look into stuff. And then, yeah, and then if there's any questions, we're always available by email or give us a call. We're happy to help.
If you have any questions you want to relay to Mirko, just throw it in the comments and I'll get you connected. No problem. So Tim, any last thoughts?
I don't even want to start it back up. We're good. Yep.
All right, good deal. All right, we'll end on that note. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right.
thank you, Steven. Have a great day there in Florida. And thanks, guys.
Yeah.
For being here. Thanks, Mirko, for
Yeah.
sharing so much today.
Yeah.
It might take a few days for me to process all the words I heard today here. I'm
20
definitely
years, take your time.
I'm definitely gonna listen to this, to the recording, to the replay several times. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, he's a bunch.
And for everyone watching, listening, share this, comment, like, and click on the links below and get educated and get hooked up with the information that Mirko is offering here. I think it's a gift.
Well, thanks, brother.
I think it's a gift.
Happy to share.
All right, Super Connector.
Super Klein.
Super Klein, yes.
Take it easy.
All right.
Super later.
Super later. Bye for now.